Hi, my name is Jackson Sargent. I'm going to be presenting on my project I did with Dr. Juergens in the School of Information titled I Should Not Have Said That, Measuring Contextually Inappropriate Language in Different Social Settings. I decided to do this project after I got the REU offer with Dr. Juergens to do research on this project over the summer. I've been engaged with academic research a lot over my time at Michigan, and so this seemed like a perfect opportunity to take a deep dive into an academic research project. It's something I could do full time over the summer and then continue into the fall. So our objectives for this project were to use natural language processing and language modeling and machine learning to investigate how context can affect whether or not certain language is appropriate. Our objectives are to build a data set of language and relationship and appropriateness labels for use in our research and further research, as well as to investigate what social information our model captures after training on this data set. So to give some background, contextual appropriateness is this idea that first, context exists at different layers and in different dimensions. There's intimacy and power and setting. As well as this, the appropriateness is often dependent on the context in which something is said, almost always. Whether or not what you say is appropriate is dependent on when and where you're saying it and to whom. And it's an open question of how or if language models understand the spectrum of appropriateness. So what language modeling really is using machine learning and math to predict words in sentences and different aspects of language, things like that. And so there's a history of measuring language understanding in machines through the use of social challenges. Some of these challenges include measuring offensiveness, intimacy, or sentiment, and when context is incorporated into these problems, it's usually limited to things that were said before. So you have someone say something, you respond, and how does that response fit into the context? But it doesn't look at things like social relationships, which is what we're investigating. And the specific model we're using for this project is the PET model. It's a language model designed to utilize patterns that are pre-trained into the model, and you input your data as like a fill in the blank. So our input was person A to person B saying some phrase or quote would be very or not appropriate. And it's that very or not that the model would be filling in the blank for. So to collect this data, we built a tool called Potato that allowed us to enter language snippets and choose which relationships are appropriate or not appropriate for use with that language. And we built this tool after many iterations of deciding how to gather this data, and this seemed like the best fit. And so we collected around 4,000 examples of these data points. Excuse me. And after training a model on this data set, we looked at the accuracy of the model as well as performed 2 initial experiments with this model. So the first experiment was holding out certain types of relationships to see from what relationships the model learns the most. And then the second experiment was to investigate a data set of movie and TV dialogue with relationships added in to identify how often changing the context and the relationship of a dialogue affects the appropriateness of that dialogue. So some of our results, the first graph in the middle there, you can see that as our training set size grows, the accuracy grows, topping out at 80% accuracy, which is quite high for a task like this, and on a new task like this. I also have an example there at the bottom of a data of a use of the data. What do you want anyhow? What you come and bother me for? That's a quote we got from the movie dialogue, and that our model deduced that is appropriate to say to a sibling, but it is inappropriate to say to your boss, which I think we can all kind of relate to or agree on. In the top right there is a graph of, I'm going to move over here. This is relationship subset performances. So the orange column, or the orange bars, represent using a model that was trained only on data that is using familial relationships. The blue bars are using all of the training data, and the green bars represent using a model that is trained only on distant relationships. And then we tested these 3 models on 3 different sets of test data, one using all relationships, one using only familial relationships, and one using only distant relationships, and got the F1 score for each of these. And we can see that the familial training data actually does well, at least as good as the all training data case, but distant training data does not do as well. And because these are initial results, we're going to investigate these further. Another initial result we have here is this heat map. Given the movie dialogue data set that we have, we investigated if you say something in one of these dialogues and our model thinks it's appropriate, if you change the relationship, what is the probability of it staying appropriate in that relationship? So an example I like to look at here is this row here for friend. It represents if you said something to your friend and it's appropriate. If you then said that same thing to your boss, if you look at this column here for boss, you can see it's very dark, which means it's a low probability of that staying appropriate. And some things we can gather initially from looking at this is that certain columns, very intimate ones, friend, parent, child, sibling, spouse, engaged, are generally, if something was appropriate before, if you say it to one of these people, it'll stay appropriate. Whereas boss, employee, student, teacher, more professional relationships, the odds of those staying appropriate are a lot lower. So clearly, the context that these dialogues are taking place in matters to whether or not they're appropriate, at least according to our model. Excuse me. So some of the conclusions we can draw from this: we can predict appropriateness given the utterance and a social context. We can see how using different types of relationships affects the model's accuracy. Using familial relationships, we can retain a high score, or using distant relationships, we can't. And then lastly, that relationships do affect appropriateness, and there's a distinct difference between professional and personal relationships. I had a lot of fun working on this project, and I'm excited to finish it up with Dr. Juergens over the next semester and write up a paper from our work. Thank you very much for listening.